Hello, Internet. My name is Arturo, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first community conversation. In this series, hosted on the BlenderNest community Discord server, I interview artists and professionals from all walks of life and ranges in skill who use Blender as a tool for work and self-expression. Today, we are joined by Erin.
Some of us here already know you, but for those of us that don't know, who is Erin?
So I'm a 3D artist, I guess, living in the north of England. I was studying interior design, and then I graduated and decided to not do that anymore, like most people with their degrees. So now I'm just doing Blender basically all day, every day, which is great. It's excellent. It's always been a hobby for a really long time. So now just being able to do it and occasionally get paid for it, that's kind of cool. I kind of enjoy that.
I'm glad to hear it. And I've also, as a student of yours, have very much enjoyed the fact that you are doing this full time and that you've devoted so much time, attention, effort, care, love into educating others on this tool that you love so much.
It's good if there's, like the more people that enjoy the content, just because of the way the platforms work, like YouTube, of course, and then if you have actual structured courses, if people are investing in that, then that just gives creators more time to do more of the same thing, right? Produce more of the things that people like. So that's, I don't know, it's a self-serving cycle, but it's to everyone's benefit, I hope.
I certainly think so. It's been something that's empowered me quite a bit. I speak a lot about my affinity and affection for self-expression, specifically digital self-expression in these times that we're all locked in, and being able to explore this tool with people who so willingly are providing educational resources and content around it has been something that has been incredibly helpful to me, both as an artist, as somebody who can now make a living to some degree with this, and a learner. And so thank you for that. And I think it's definitely something that's been met. I'm sure that the fact that all these people have turned up to give it a listen is testament to that.
I think it's been especially empowering through the pandemic as well. Like obviously a lot of people have had just the worst time with the pandemic, but then there's a lot of kind of artists and creatives who are online who have had, especially like online communities like this, have helped accelerate our knowledge and our like skill sharing, and actually create like a proper community. So like stuff like this, what we're doing now and what you're hosting, is such a like literal lifesaver for so many people. So thank you for doing this.
I'm really happy to do it, and I want to thank the BlenderNest group and folks and crew, and obviously everyone who's on the server and currently listening for being a part of this too. Because I think Manu was the one who said it earlier in our Apple Watch after party, dance party, random casual room, that in some ways Discord and these online communities have been a saver for everybody during these trying, unprecedented, crazy times that we're living in. And I hope to see it continue to grow even after the world opens up again. And I'm excited for that. Let's see, how's the chat doing? Yes, we're doing well. Friends at Discord. Yeah, this is very true. I mean, I've been meeting people and chatting with people who I don't think I would have had the same opportunity to meet with. And so that's been a blessing.
And also because it's an interest group that you can join from anywhere. Like the barrier for entry is basically, do you have a phone? And obviously for us being Blender people, all of us have a computer and most of us have access to the internet. So Discord is like a really great kind of leveling factor for everybody to be able to join. And at least like when I was interacting with people in real life, my interaction with 3D artists was like, I don't know, I know a couple of people who use 3ds Max, and like one person who's once opened Blender. And like now I'm able to interact with Blender people who are like career Blender artists every day, which is just awesome. And it like really boosts your learning potential, I think.
Absolutely. I have experienced this, firsthand on your server. And so in the subject and context of communities, you and then shut down and host this server, which I'll post a link to in the chat in just a moment. But you hold these battle royales, Blender Royale, one of which happened yesterday. And for those that don't know, how would you describe the Blender Royales?
Well, huge thanks to Steph for organizing them, Online Render. It was his idea originally, and he's like carried through hosting each time as well. So massive thanks to him for doing that. They're basically like a battle royale, but everybody's using Blender. So there's a prompt. Usually it comes on the day of, if not like a few minutes before. They are epic. That's all you need to know. The rules are pretty loose. Basically, you take the prompt and you make something with it, whether or not that's a solo round where it's like kind of free for all, or whether it's in teams where you sort of do a bit of a round robin in different teams. And then at the end, somebody is selected as the winner by popular vote. And they're really short as well, like 45 minutes or 72 minutes, depending on if it's solo or team play. And yeah, you learn so much, and so much about like efficiency and time management, because, an hour is kind of a long time when you think about it, but when you're actually making something, it's no time at all. So you have to be really efficient with the way that you assign yourself tasks. And if you're like, well, I need to make a whole scene, then you actually set up your camera basically immediately, because you have to do everything for the camera. You have to do your lighting immediately to make sure that everything is like the way it will be. And you can obviously do tweaks and things, but it's so easy, especially as 3D artists, for us to like spend 2 hours or 5 hours. I think Rob Decoded did a bit of a talk about this in one of his recent videos, saying like, oh, you spend so long making these small assets which end up in the background taking up like 10 pixels. And if you work to camera right from the beginning, that's like a huge efficiency gain. So it's just about, making sure that it's like a learning experience, right? The Blender Royales are incredible, but also just they're a huge amount of fun and social contact for people who are maybe having a bit of a lack of that at the moment. And just a bit of adrenaline as well, especially the team ones, when you know that people are waiting for you to do good and you can't find any of your shortcuts anymore. It's just like a stressful mess, but also a great time if you're into that.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. I participated in the one yesterday, and I've been in a couple. I know some of the people here listening and on the server have as well. I just pasted a link in the live text chat, which is where you can drop your questions if you have them, to Erin's server. And so these happen every Monday. Don't ask me at what, 3 p.m. my time, I think. But there is an announcements and events page. One thing I've really enjoyed about these is that getting to expand that community. So my Blender community online started with you all being a BlenderNest and some of these Discords, and then expanded to what we have today. And getting to meet people like Purse and Kate and Dre's and some of the others that are here listening in a really casual way, where we're all sort of on the same wavelength, working on similar projects, sometimes even together in these battle royales. Blender Royales is really fun. And there are also, I understand, some social events that aren't so competition focused that happen on the server as well.
Yeah, we have Isaac arranges the Gaz renders. If you want to check out his YouTube, he arranges the Saturday Social Modeling Club, which is just a bit of a hangout. It's usually sort of later in the evening if you're in the Europe or the UK, but sort of daytime, afternoon if you're in the US. So we've tried to schedule stuff so that it's kind of around the clock for different events, just because obviously in international community. So yeah, the Saturday Social Modeling Club, that was fun just to like hang out, have a bit of a chat. There's a bit of a prompt as well. If I know a lot of people they want to make something, but they don't necessarily know what. So Isaac makes sure there is a prompt available for people to jump into if they want to do that. Or a lot of us just turn up and carry on working on the projects that we're already working on. So just a nice way to hang out, I think.
It really is. And I can't recommend it enough, especially, well, actually, I was going to say, especially if you're new to the community, but I think at any level, it's just great to be able to chat with people who are down to earth and working on the same project as you. And you'll never find any drama or anything like that on the server. So strongly recommend.
Yeah, it's really chill. I think a lot of people see the numbers as well, and like I would as well see like, oh, we've got like 2,500 members. That's crazy, but everybody is just really chill. Like we never have trouble. It's just everyone's really friendly. Everyone's on the same wavelength, so it's a really positive place to be.
It's a good time to hang out and a good place to hang out. In the context of constraints and time constraints, I want to ask you a question that will pull us a little bit away from the community, but feel free to drive us back if you feel so inclined. But I want to ask you, when I say cabinet making, what comes to mind?
Making cabinets. I mean, this is what I used to do. My like learning has been so weird. I have like these knee-jerk reactions against stuff, and then I'm like, well, I absolutely can't do anything to do with computers anymore. So like I went to Bournemouth Uni to do computer animation, and I just hated it. They tried to teach me Python, and I did not react well, so I dropped out, and then was like, oh, I'm gonna go and be a joiner. I'm never gonna use a computer again. And then I did that for a few years, trained, got like qualified as a joiner and a cabinet maker, and was working. And then at some point I was like, well, maybe I should go back to uni and like go up to the next level. So rather than being somebody who makes cabinets, be somebody who designs them. And like that's broader than that. It's just like furniture, joinery, interiors in general. And then, yeah, just going through university and ended up going back to Blender, as I always seem to end up coming back to Blender. But cabinet making was like such an amazing thing to get to do. Like so many people don't get to spend years honing hand skills and like making skills. And I think it's really valuable to have like actual physical real world skills on top of being able to use a computer, which is obviously the way that most of us make money and has a lot of scalability in the future. But for like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's really empowering to be able to work with your hands and be able to make stuff. Like I know that if I had a house that was derelict, I know I could build walls and fill all of the furniture and do all the electrics and the plumbing. Like these skills are really useful in like a very real sense. But at the same time, unless you're doing really well or you're working with a bigger company, it's kind of hard to make money. So that's kind of why I moved away from doing that.
Yeah, I think that, as you said, those are really real skills and really valuable to have. I know that personally, I have a lot of friends who are programmers, and I think the majority of my friends at the moment work on computer-based anything. And something that they all seem to have in common is that they find some form of physical skill or even hobby to be lacking. And I think that obviously that sounds like a very valuable and hands-on task.
It can be an expensive hobby if you do want to, like painting. If you just paint, obviously paying for materials and like paints and things, that can get really expensive. But if you are also trying to like maintain a workshop where you have like extraction and like planer thicknesses and table saws and things like that, then there's a bit of a barrier to entry in terms of like the cost to go into it. However, there are makers places in, loads of libraries have like 3D printers and laser cutters and things like that. So if you're interested in making stuff, I would definitely see if you can find a maker space around you rather than feeling like you need to invest in a studio or workshop. But I would also say just get a physical skill. Like it's so rewarding to have something physical that you use. Like I have furniture which I've made, or even little things like skirting and thresholds around the house. Like to know that you invested the time into making those things and they're actually kind of beautiful. Like if you were to go just to like Homebase or B&Q or I don't know, whatever your like hardware stores are around you, then the tat that you end up buying in those places at huge expense. It's not rewarding at all to see like a nasty little bit of metal and it's like, that's just rubbish. It's just rubbish.
Yeah.
So
I can see what you did there, sort of thing. I think to bring us back a little bit into the world of 3D and
sure.
And kind of retain the same wavelength, I want to talk a bit or just cycle through timber, which I'm going to paste here in the live text chat, because I think that with your background in cabinet making and attention to detail in this, to me, this seems like a very appropriate jump and very appropriate project to take on. And so if you could tell us a bit about what this process was like for you in going through. I'm going to also paste the Gumroad link here if people want to check it out. It's free
if people are interested.
Mm-hmm. It's a free PBR wood material. Go ahead.
Sorry, doing the Discord thing. I think this was like the first procedural texture that I really made. I did Lance Van's procedural fabric fiber tutorial, which I think a lot of people did a couple of years ago. And then I was like, well, now I kind of understand. Yeah, Lance Van is amazing, Joey. He's so good. He does loads of really cool 3D portraits as well, which I think is how he earns most of his money, which is very cool. Anyway, so this was like the first thing that I went off to do after doing that tutorial, the fabric fiber one, because he shows you how to do like offset rows and using like height blending to get things going over, which is basically where you use the maximum value to just display whichever thing should be on top. And I was kind of looking at it like, you could, if you can get offset rows, then you can basically do like bricks and floorboards and things. And then it's just a case of building more and more functionality into it. I have to admit that this shader, because it was like one of the first things I was doing, it's not very good. I mean, like the results are kind of cool, but in terms of performance and optimization, it's not all there. I have been meaning to redo it basically for 12 months now. But there's, I'm kind of proud of it, but that link that Joey just posted in the chat, that one. So there's so much about timber that is not specifically the material, but like the actual physical real life wood that is so difficult to get in a shader. And I think certainly having like experience of spending years looking at wood very closely really helped me to make something that was passable. But there's still so many things in here which that I could probably do now, but timber is a very complicated material because it has so many differences of like opacity and the way light refracts underneath the surface, and different kinds of wood have different reactions to that. But yeah, I'm interested to do more like compound material geometry node setups, because I think shader displacement is not good, basically. I think it's very costly in terms of performance, and obviously a lot of people don't have computers that can handle like 0.5 pixel dicing or whatever you need to do to get like really high fidelity. So I think if you could make like a general material, right, that is just like wood, infinite wood, and then have a geometry node set up that is like doing your planks, or if you're doing like a brick wall, you could do like a, I don't know, sort of terracotta-ish material and then put this on all of your different bricks. So I think there's like a really interesting workflow that is available here, and I think we'll see more and more people pick that up and start to create all of these like interesting digital assets that are sort of multifaceted in the way that they work. We need more about how to like interface different stuff, though. Like doing shader settings and geometry node settings in different workspaces is not really ideal, but I think there's I'm really interested to see what Kurt does with his Python geometry node stuff, because I know obviously we can control materials with Python. So I think, anyway, I'm just like thinking out loud here. I think there's like a really good opportunity for making really cool assets, digital assets come in.
Absolutely. And no need to apologize for thinking out loud. That we're all here to listen. So thanks for sharing all that. I do think that there's a huge future in obviously procedural materials and procedural workflows, and that's what I think a perfect segue into talking about how dare you think I know. And so I think the perfect segue into why the hell did you make a 14-hour video, and what is this 14-hour video about? For those that don't
I don't really know. I didn't expect it to be 14 hours. For anybody who's watched like the first few minutes of it, hear me like repeatedly say, oh, if you're watching the 7-hour version, it just ended up being a really long process. And I think this is something that always happens with projects when you're not like, I don't know, especially at the beginning of your career, it's so difficult to, and I've talked to Dre's about this before, it's so difficult to choose or to properly see how long a project is going to take, and then combine that with it being a personal project that's not really planned from the start. So you're just kind of feeling your way through as well, and just seeing like, oh, this needs to move over here, and then there's an empty space, so I need to make another asset to go in there. And so for people who don't know, basically the 14-hour video is the full process minus a few hours of color grading, which I did at the end and just didn't bother recording because it's just like going backwards and forwards, tweaking colors in Affinity Photo. So that's not very interesting to watch, but like the whole geometry nodes process is in there. And it's basically the making of the Blender 2.93 splash screen, which is a huge honor that they chose it. And kind of funny, Arturo, I said to you before I started it, like I think you'd like just had your vaccine that day, and you were playing Warzone, and I was like, oh, I should come on, and I was like, no, it's time for Operation Get Erin a splash screen. So it was my plan, but I didn't think I was going to actually do it.
It was so inspiring to me, and obviously as your friend, so exciting to see you achieve that, because that's exactly what happened, Erin. We were just having a chance, like Operation Get Erin a splash screen, and lo and behold, a month later, boom. And I'm so proud of you. I'm sure we all are. And if you are curious as to how this was made, not only is there a 14-hour video available, but we have Erin here to talk to us about something to whatever level of detail you're comfortable with and happy with, that we somehow managed to go nearly 25 minutes, 30 minutes without saying, which is the two-word mystery of geometry nodes. So what are geometry nodes, and why are you so excited about them?
I'm excited because I'm interested in procedural workflows. I saw stuff posted before, why don't I use Houdini? And that's a good question. I probably should. I do have it installed. I just, I'm so familiar with Blender. I think it's not an issue, but it's kind of where I've been. And so it is also because I am scared of Houdini. So that's correct. But I don't know, Houdini is like so vast and something which I find kind of unattractive from like a personal fun wanting to just play around with the system. Obviously I can see the value in production, having all of the tools there and available. But for me, as somebody who is like, I'm interested in creating workflows and creating tools, kind of as much or maybe more than actually creating the work itself, which is why you probably won't see so much art from me. Like the splash screen is a bit of a one-off. Like I don't really make things if I'm not doing professional visualization work. Whereas like what I'm really interested in is making tools like the geometry nodes toolkit that I have. But I find the thing with splash screen that I don't like, not splash screen, the thing with Houdini that I don't really like is it's all there. Like you can just do it and you can walk the same path that everybody else has walked. And with geometry nodes, especially at the moment, because it's such an early system, there's just so many things that you can do that you like shouldn't be able to do. And I just find that really exciting. Like I find it really interesting as well that everybody says, oh, it's just a scattering system, it's useless, it's not good for anything but making grass. And then I don't know, I always think when I look at my cat watching me walk around the house, and it's like, to her, humans must be so weird. Like we just pick stuff up and put it in a different room. And it's like, we don't really do anything. We just move stuff all the time. And that's exactly what we do with geometry nodes. Like everything we do is just positioning stuff.
I love that.
Yes. But it's so like even like painting, right? Obviously moving paint around, there is a degree of like mixing and fluid dynamics going on. But you can get like a really cool paint effect if you were to literally just scatter like some pre-made paint blobs that you had made And so there's so much you can do, like almost an infinite amount you can do just by scattering stuff. And it obviously depends on the resolution that you work at as well. If you were to go down to basically like an atomic scale, you can make anything because everything's just made up of all these little balls. So it's just completely, we have complete freedom if you have a little bit of math savvy. So I appreciate that a lot of people are a little bit more afraid of maths or don't necessarily have the skills. And for me, I don't think of myself as a math person, but I've like ground out the skill just by doing shaders for a few years. So I'm super visual, but Blender really lends itself to visual maths people. I've used other systems like SvurChalk and Sorcar and animation nodes, and they're all amazing, but the kind of issue with those is the performance. I generally make rather extensive node setups, so it becomes a bit of a problem if you are working on, I don't know, if you have 500 plus nodes in something like SvurChalk, which is Python based, it gets almost unusable. It's basically too slow to do anything. Whereas geometry nodes, which is properly integrated and written in C++, I think, it's, unless you're using Booleans, as long as you're just using like the regular nodes, you should still be good to go. So super empowering, I find, to use that.
And it shows, and I'm really glad that you brought up maths, because that's one of the questions or one of the topics that I wanted to touch on here. I know from chatting with you and from watching interviews that you've had before that you are not the strongest at math. I don't feel like I'm the strongest at math either, but I definitely feel very, what's the right phrase? Like, I agree that there is something to Blender being so visual that can help people that learn differently grasp that. And so how do you bridge that gap between not feeling so strong in math? I don't want to say bad at math, because that instills this negative emotion around math that I've been trying to shed off, especially in being November, which is a whole thing we can talk about for ages, and these different operations that are available for not just vector displacement, but just shaders math as well. So how do you bridge that gap between not being so savvy in math and being able to use these tools that are afforded to us by math within Blender?
So I think the main thing is that I'm not afraid of maths. Like, a lot of people see it as like, oh my God, the math node, I don't want to touch that. Or, when I started using shaders, and you'll actually see this if you look at some of Simon Thomas's like old shaders, like he's obviously incredible, but his first, like his earlier shaders that he was sharing, they were never using the vector math node. They were just using like separate and combine XYZ, and then he was doing the maths in parallel, even if it was the same. Like, even if you could just do that with a vector math node instead. But I think it's just this idea that like, oh my God, vector math, it must be completely like, I know nothing about that. I won't touch it. But actually, for the most part, at least, like vector math is just doing maths in the regular sense, just in 3 lines in parallel. But yeah, I think not being afraid of maths is the biggest thing. When you're using Blender, I know it's like easy to get stressed out about doing maths, but the worst thing that is going to happen to you in Blender is it's just not going to do the thing that you expected. Like, nothing bad is actually going to happen. So a lot of the like getting into using maths is just testing it. Like, I think having like a bit of scientific method helps a lot as well. Like, hypothesize what you think is going to happen and then try it. And if it works, great. And if it didn't work, try and like go back through and see why it didn't work. And if you can't work it out, then obviously ask somebody as well, if you have somebody available. If you're here in the chat, then obviously you have access to Discord, and there are so many people who can help on these communities. So yeah, I think with a lot of the maths tools, like for me, not necessarily knowing how stuff works, but still being able to use it. There's, I couldn't tell you how an engine works, but I can still drive a car. Like, I feel like it's the same thing. Or like powered steering, right? I don't know why like what, I don't know how it knows which way I'm steering and why it goes in the same direction. Like that's the same thing. Like I can still turn the steering wheel without knowing what happens under the hood. And it's exactly the same with Blender. Like you can have these things with like the maths. So the one I always go back to is like circles. If you have like a number range between 0 and 2 pi, and you put it through like sine and cosine, and then you use that as your x and your y, it'll draw a circle. Like that's the vectors that will be output will be a unit circle. And that you don't really need to know why that works, but to know that that tool is available. Like obviously it's a hassle to set it up, but as soon as you know, like you just have to remember, oh, okay, I just need those 4 nodes. And then that is going to work in shaders or Sverchok or geometry nodes every single time. So I think it's the same. And like animation, I don't know how animation works, but I can still use the animation tools in Blender. I think people just get scared off by the fact that the maths, like in shaders and geometry nodes, is quite low level. Like you get to see, oh, it's divide or it's modulo or whatever. Like it seems like it should be complicated, even if it either isn't complicated actually, or you don't need to know what it's doing.
Right. We're afforded all these different levels of abstraction within the tool. And in some ways, the shaders kind of expose that and let us tinker and see how it works.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's sage advice, not being afraid to play with it. And I think one of the things that has been really incredibly useful for me is something I'm going to paste in the chat here, which is Erin's introduction to procedural textures and their notes. There are several tutorials like
bad
on their YouTube channel, so I strongly recommend that you check these out. And I hope, Citrus, if you're still here listening, that this sort of math question answered your earlier question. I want to, let's see. Yes, I want to tackle just a couple of the questions that came in from the chat, then open it up to obviously the rest of the BlenderNest crew who's joining me here on the stage, and then finally everyone who's joining us in the audience to ask questions. So again, if you have questions that you want to have Erin answer, you can start feeding them into the chat. I'll pick them up. And in the meantime, I'll start with this question from Light, who asked earlier, I have a question for Erin. What was your best project that you enjoyed and the worst?
That's a really difficult question. My best project, do you mean like a full project or just like a thing that I was like, oh, wow, I'm really proud I made that? I don't know if there's a huge difference, but
I feel like I'd be curious to hear the latter, like what you're proud of. And Light, if you're still listening, you can contextualize the question if you like, but answer it how you prefer.
I think just because for me, most like proper projects are things which I've either done for clients, which are not generally super rewarding, just because they're a little bit more like run of the mill, right? People ask you to do pretty usual things, whether that's visualization or like making shaders and things. Whereas like in my sort of personal work, it's more just experimental, sort of constant, just research and development. So I think like the thing that I'm most proud of is radial arrays in shaders. And I know it's like a really, like now I look at it and I'm like, that's so simple. Like, of course I could do that. But at the time, I had really no idea what I was doing. And also there was I wasn't on Discord. I wasn't on, I was on the Procedural Textures Facebook page, which is really good if you prefer to use Facebook. That just have a search for Blender nodes and Blender Procedural Textures, 2 really good pages. But again, there wasn't like such a sense of community, and it wasn't so like, I don't know, you could ask questions and they would probably get answered maybe within a few days, but it wasn't like really, I don't know, it doesn't feel like the Discord communities where you're like all hanging out together and there's always people around. But yeah, making the radial arrays, it's one of the early procedural textures videos that I made. And it uses that whole like sine and cos thing to get stuff to move out and to be able to do stuff in a radial array, right? So you can put multiple things around in a circle within a shader. But that was just a really proud moment for me because I was like, this is a thing which I can make. Oh my God, Matisse. That was the.
What are we looking at here?
That was such a good project. I'll come on to that in a second. That may be actually more proud moment. So the radial arrays were just cool because it was the first time that I had a real breakthrough with maths as a non-maths person, being like, this is sufficiently abstract that you couldn't necessarily just think like, oh, I want to move it left, so I need to add something or subtract something. It was like sine and cos, which is like kind of the next level. And it was producing an actual thing which I wanted, and it was intentional rather than it just being like, oh, we're just adding noise in here. So it really felt like I was building an actual tool that was robust. And that was a really proud moment for me, just because it was the first time I did it. The thing that Matisse just posted is it's kind of hard to explain. For people who don't have the visuals, it's a picture of Matisse with his big thick beard. But I don't know, Matisse, if you have the animation, you should post it in the chat. So it's basically animated to sing along to a song and spin around, and it's like fully 3D, but it's all shader based, and it's really weird. The mouth moves. There's loads of eyes all over it. It's just odd. It was one of those, yeah, cooked with fire. It was just great fun. It's one of those things that just happens on these Discord communities. I feel like I'm trying to convert people all the time, but like when you're sat in a voice chat with a bunch of people who are all just hanging out, it's like such a melting pot of ideas, and somebody can just be like, oh, you should do that. And then the next person like takes it, like children's game where like you write a sentence and then you fold it over and you give it to the next person, they write the next line.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just like this ridiculous expanding project, which kind of goes nowhere, but yeah, just ends up being really weird. I did another one in like a 2D thing the other day in another server, which was just very strange. It was like a blobfish, wiener, dog, horse thing with a beaver riding it. It was very odd. But it's just, oh, Pers, you probably shouldn't.
It's not family friendly.
Yeah, it was just very strange, but it's one of those things that you get from being in like these creative melting pots, which is really just a really great thing.
It's lovely. And so having aha moments like the radial arrays solution within shaders, that's fun and really empowering because it propels you to keep pushing forward and kind of affirms that you're on the right path. But what was one of the oh no moments as opposed to the aha moments where you're like, oh, I can't do this again?
There have been so many projects that I've given up on. I think no, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, if you don't want to get into it, I think we can all think about that one project that's just like, I'd rather not talk about that. And we have some other questions from Drace and Bouncy as well before we open it up to.
Sure. I mean, there's nothing that really like jumps out as me as being a particularly like terrible experience. I generally jump out of stuff. I think, I mean, yeah, when I was at university, a lot of the projects I was working on, they were integrating a lot of Blender work in terms of spatial planning and design and visualizing. Those projects, just because they felt very much like I was jumping through hoops for somebody else and not necessarily being invested completely, and knowing that it's like a 6-month project, just like that whole feeling of like, I'm running out of steam, but I still have to do it. That's just, I know it's not like specifically Blender related, but and I know there's other people here as well who have had projects that just run on, and to try and like find your mojo while also hating everything about your day to day, just because this project is like your entire life and it's not going very well. Yeah, if anybody is having that issue, have a break. Like, if you feel like it's going horribly wrong and you're not making any progress, it doesn't matter if you take a couple of days off, because you weren't going to make progress anyway. But you might come back with a bit of inspiration and a bit of like a fresh head for it. So yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, mental health breaks are important, especially if you need to distance yourself from a project that's just weighing you down. Can recommend.
Yeah,
we have Yeah. We have 3 questions coming up before we open it up that I think I can somehow meld into one. So if we don't mind hearing me try to do so in the air, Drace
Sure.
asked 2 questions about geometry nodes and bouncy as well. So Drace asks, do you think you'll with geometry nodes, do you think you'll still invest work and knowledge with Sverchok? And we'll put a pin on that briefly. The follow-up question was, with the current setup and features of geometry nodes, do you think modular or random character generation could be created? And we'll wrap those 2 into their own little ball. And then Bouncy Hippo asked, what are the advantages of geometry nodes over the current system in Blender? What sort of people is it for? And would I, for example, want to learn and use it for creating environment renders and stuff? And I think in the context of the knowledge that you have with other procedural tools, the knowledge you have with vanilla Blender, and the visions that you have of Blender and geometry nodes' future, there's some way to combine these 3 into an answer that is the delicious soundbite that we're all waiting for. So no pressure.
So I feel like just for that final question, Bouncy Hippo, learn geometry nodes. Just learn it. Like, I can't recommend, if you're watching this now, go and learn geometry nodes. It will take you like a week maybe to learn it, because it's still quite a small thing. Like, regardless of what you're doing, just add this tool to your toolbox, and it will serve you really well in the future when they add more tools, and maybe you're working on projects and you're like, I just really want to do that. And then you can use geometry nodes. And even if the tools have changed, you'll still have like your foundational understanding that you'll get from learning it now, while there's only really the core tools. About making environments and making modular assets, and I think making modular, was it specifically modular characters?
I believe the question was random character generation or modular, modular assets or random character generation.
So for modular assets, yeah, for sure. Like street scene assets, making like buildings and things like this, it's really good for. I'm not 100% convinced of its abilities right now for doing character work. Like, there's a certain amount of like blending meshes together that would be, and maybe even like shape keys and things like this. And you can do stuff with shape keys, but you just can't integrate those shape keys with geometry nodes at the moment. So I think unless you have like loads of different heads and they kind of stop just underneath the neck, and then you've got and no armature control. So unless you're writing Python scripts that do your modular assets with geometry nodes and then rig it through Python.
I think we lost Erin for a moment, or maybe just me.
I can't hear him as well.
Okay, we'll wait a little bit.
Then
you're back.
Yeah. Sorry,
we lost you for a bit.
So I think with like if you're making really big tools like Python tools that do all of the like adding these different systems together and sorting everything out together, I think it's difficult with geometry nodes because it's so new still. Like the spreadsheet isn't finished yet. The attribute processor hasn't been started yet. The like the curve tools have been started, but they've not been put into master yet. There's asset tools which are being planned. So there's so many things which are going to come, and they're going to be on the table soon, sort of within the next few months. But for right now, and I think actually the armature stuff, I think is probably more relevant to collection nodes, which is going to be developed after geometry nodes. So we should see that this year. So there we go.
Thanks for
There was a third question, actually, wasn't there? There was the, will I keep doing Sverchok? That's a really difficult question to answer because I really love Sverchok. And I love the interaction with the system because it's visual and you just connect nodes together rather than using attributes. I'm really critical of the attribute workflow. I don't really believe it's, I don't know, I haven't really seen its strengths yet, and that might just be because the system is unfinished. so for now, I still think like the working with SvechOk is a much more enjoyable and intuitive experience. I have a lot of tutorials planned for SvechOk, and I was planning on doing a generative design for architecture course with SvechOk. Just like a short course, like 10 hours or something for people if they're interested in getting into SvechOk and like looking at generative architecture as the kind of the basis for that. But it's kind of difficult. Like the more I work with geometry nodes, another thing which is hard about that is you don't get so many clicks. And I hate to fall into the trap of being like, I'm doing this because of the clicks. But at the same time, the clicks kind of govern my income. So
baby's gotta eat.
Does put, yeah. Like I love SvechOk, but also I don't want to feel like I'm getting people in because they're interested in geometry nodes and then doing SvechOk tutorials and having them all be like, what the hell is this? This is just some add-on. But SvechOk's amazingly powerful. If you're interested in it, it's got like 600 nodes already. So yeah.
Certainly give it a look.
Yeah.
We're about to reach the hour mark, and I'm really, really happy that throughout this whole bit, we've had so many of you staying and chatting. This is really inspiring and really, bodes well for the server, and it's encouraging for us too to continue to host these spaces. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're not wrapping up. Just wanted to give a quick thanks, and obviously a big and heartfelt thanks to Erin for giving us so much of their time today. And at this point,
thank you.
Yeah. And I want to open it up to the other folks joining me here on the stage. If you have questions, comments, or anything that you want to chat with Erin about for everyone before we start taking some people who might want to join us up here, then definitely feel free. And in the meantime, right before that, I'll just quickly paste in the chat. Normally, I would ask our guests, where can people find you online? And I can ask you that, Erin, but I can also answer it for you. And so if you are curious about where to find Erin online, there are all their links as far as
there's a lot of links. Yeah, I think you basically got them all. Actually, there's no Blender Market on there. Let me just grab. I know a lot of people prefer to use Blender Market than Gumroad. And even though I would say that if you want to support creators more, maybe use their Gumroad just because they get a bigger commission. But this is obviously if you prefer.
But yes, if you prefer Blender, use that. And if you're more of the Linktree type, there's Erin's Linktree as well.
Awesome. Thanks for doing that. I always forget half of these anyway.
Of course, happy to do it.
Yeah. It's great, Erin, talking to you about how you started everything. And I have one question. So when you plan a geometry nodes project, like for example, the splash screen was the hugest, like the biggest one you did so far.
Yeah.
Like what are the challenges that you encountered in these process? Like, and how did you find solutions for them? Or did you not find any solutions?
Right, with geometry nodes, one of the biggest issues is that when you have like hundreds of nodes, geometry nodes calculates the whole tree all the time. Like every time you do something, it thinks about everything. And that's even like adding a new node that you've not connected or changing the color of a frame, like things which shouldn't impact performance at all and shouldn't be computed. Suddenly, they can take like 3 or 4 seconds to compute once you've got a few hundred nodes going. So, and yeah, in shaded trees as well, you can have like really big performance hits. So this is something which I'm trying to work out the proper workflow for. The way that I did the splash screen, I did everything in one node tree. And that was the wrong method. And it's kind of the method that they keep telling us is the wrong method. And I've repeatedly just been like, I want to do everything in one node tree, so I'm gonna like the whole have it as a modifier on a specific object. They kind of want you to do every object individually like we would normally. So I should have made the basket as an object, and then I should have made the flowers as an object, and I should have made the table and the blanket and the shelves and whatever as all unique objects, which I could then move in 3D and do all of that. And also when you alter one, all it needs to compute is its own node tree. You don't need to compute 400 other nodes that are irrelevant for the change that you're actually making.
Yes.
So that's something just to bear in mind for people when you're working on these bigger shaders. Like this was kind of the reason I made the splash screen image anyway, was just as a bit of a stress test really for geometry nodes, just because I haven't seen people do really significant node trees that are like really pushing it. So yeah, just the main issues to like work around and to build your systems around not running into them is just separate stuff. Try and compartmentalize and keep things a little bit more separate. You can still have stuff talking to each other with the object info nodes, but obviously it's not as good as just being able to plug one thing into something else. And obviously no attribute transfer.
Yeah. I think his internet got cut out again.
Sort of coming and going. Is that?
Yeah.
Ellie had a question for you, I think. Welcome back, by the way.
Oh,
Hey, you're back.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining the chat today. It's been lovely and insightful to listen to you share. Speaking of compartmentalization, sort of shifting away from node trees to time, how do you manage time when it comes to putting out your videos, making products, interacting on Discord, participating in community events? Particularly since I joined Discord, I've felt a little bit overstimulated, and I'm curious to know how others are, and you specifically, are managing that.
I do not manage time at all. I'm like constantly in this weird state of like free fall, but also like constantly being as if I'm hitting the ground. So I like my.
Unfortunately, Erin's internet continued to drop in and out during the rest of this session, so we decided to adjourn early. But if you'd like to join the BlenderNest server and take part in these community conversations and the larger discussions, or if you'd like to get in touch with Erin, you'll find all the relevant links in the show notes in the description of this video. If you enjoyed this conversation and this format, please consider giving the video a like, as it will help us grow the channel and the community. If you want to stay in tune and in touch with what we share, also consider subscribing if you haven't already, and turning on the channel notifications so you can be the first to know when these videos drop. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.